The chocolate milk dripped slowly from the certificate, each drop hitting the cafeteria floor like a countdown to something terrible. Madison Brooks stood there, frozen. As Connor Sheffield's foot came down hard on her sandwich, the only meal she'd have until her shift ended at 11 that night. "Eat it," he said, his voice carrying across the silent cafeteria. "Show everyone where trash scholars belong." 500 students watched. Not one of them moved. And in that moment, as Madison looked into Connor's eyes, she didn't see hatred. She saw fear. Pure, naked fear of a boy who knew his empire was built on sand. You know, they say the worst kind of bullying happens in broad daylight, with everyone watching. But what happened at Riverside High School that spring wasn't just bullying. It was something darker, a system protecting itself from the truth. Madison Brooks was 17 years old, and she was tired. Not the kind of tired you get from staying up late at a party or cramming for a test. This was bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that settles into your soul when you've been running on empty for too long. Every morning, her alarm went off at 4 a.m., not because she was some overachiever trying to get ahead, but because those quiet hours before dawn were the only time she had to study. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. By 4:30, she was at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around her like armor against the world. Her father would shuffle past around 5. His back still stiff from the accident 3 years ago that took away his ability to work. He'd pat her shoulder just once, gently, and she'd hear the unspoken apology in that touch, the weight of dreams he couldn't afford to give her. "Morning, sweetheart," he'd whisper, and she'd whisper back, "Morning, Dad." And they'd both pretend her mother wasn't already gone to her night shift at the Amazon warehouse. Pretend the electricity bill wasn't 2 months overdue. Pretend that everything was going to be okay. School started at 7:30, but Madison's real education had begun long before that. See, when you're poor in a rich school district, you learn things they don't teach in textbooks. You learn to smile when kids complain about their ancient 2-year-old iPhones while you're using a flip phone from 2008. You learn to say you're not hungry when everyone's ordering $20 lunches from DoorDash. You learn to be invisible. But Madison had made one crucial mistake. She'd forgotten to hide her intelligence. It started small, the way these things always do. An A+ on an essay here. A perfect score on a test there. Teachers began to notice. "Have you considered applying to Ivy League schools?" Ms. Rodriguez had asked after class one day, her voice full of that dangerous thing called hope. Madison had laughed not because it was funny, but because what else could she do? "I work 20 hours a week at Subway. Miss Rodriguez, I can't even afford the application fees." But her grades kept climbing, steady and relentless as sunrise. By junior year, she had a perfect 4.0 GPA, and that's when she appeared on Connor Sheffield's radar. Connor Sheffield was everything Madison wasn't. His father owned 3 car dealerships. His mother was on the school board. He'd been groomed for success since birth. Private tutors, SAT prep courses that cost more than Madison's family made in a month, summer programs at prestigious universities. He was supposed to be valedictorian. It was his birthright, as certain as his acceptance to Yale, as guaranteed as his future. The first time Connor really noticed Madison was in AP Literature. They were discussing The Great Gatsby, and the teacher asked about the symbolism of the green light. Connor gave his rehearsed answer, something his tutor had prepared about hope and the American dream. Then Madison raised her hand. "I think the green light represents the lies we tell ourselves," she said quietly. "Gatsby stares at it every night, convincing himself that money can recreate the past, that privilege can rewrite history. But the light is across the water, unreachable, just like the dream is unreachable for most of us. Fitzgerald wasn't writing about hope. He was writing about delusion." The classroom went silent. Ms. Rodriguez's eyes lit up, and Connor Sheffield turned around in his seat to really look at Madison Brooks for the first time. She was thin, too thin, the kind that comes from skipping meals, not from yoga and juice cleanses. Her clothes were clean, but worn. The same 3 outfits rotated week after week. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No highlights, no expensive treatments. But her eyes were sharp as broken glass, and they saw everything. "Interesting perspective," Connor said, his voice smooth as honey. "Though I wonder if that interpretation comes from personal bitterness." A few students snickered. Madison's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it comes from knowing the difference between earning something and having it handed to you." The snickers stopped. Connor's jaw tightened. War had been declared. Over the next few months, Connor tried everything. He formed study groups and made sure Madison wasn't invited. He spread rumors that she was cheating, that there was no way someone who worked at Subway could be that smart without help. He got his friends to accidentally spill things on her homework, to take her calculator during tests, to make her life miserable in 1,000 small ways. But Madison kept rising. Her grades never faltered. If anything, she seemed to grow stronger under pressure, like coal being compressed into diamond. Then came the announcement that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning in March, unseasonably warm, the kind of day that made you think about endings and beginnings. Principal Harrison's voice crackled over the intercom during homeroom. "Good morning, Riverside High. I'm pleased to announce this year's National Merit Scholarship finalists." Connor sat up straighter, already preparing his humble smile. His name would be called. Of course it would. His father had donated $50,000 to the school's new computer lab. He'd scored 1490 on his SATs after 3 tries and 2 different tutors. He was Connor Sheffield. From our senior class, we have 3 finalists, Jennifer Chen, Michael Thompson, and Madison Brooks. The world seemed to tilt. Connor's name wasn't called, but Madison's was. Madison Brooks, the girl who smelled like sandwich meat and minimum wage, was a national merit finalist. And he wasn't. Jennifer and Michael were called to the office to receive their certificates. Madison's name was called last. And as she stood up, Connor watched her walk past him. She didn't look at him, didn't gloat, just walked with that same quiet dignity that made him want to scream. That's when something inside Connor Sheffield broke. Not cracked, not bent broke. Because Madison Brooks wasn't just threatening his valedictorian spot anymore. She was threatening his entire worldview. If she could achieve this, if she could beat him with nothing but determination and intelligence, then what did that say about everything his parents had bought for him? What did that say about him? The cafeteria was packed when Madison returned from the principal's office, her certificate in hand. She'd allowed herself one moment of pride, one moment to hold that piece of paper and think maybe, just maybe, this could be her ticket out, her chance at something better. She was walking to her usual table in the corner, the one near the trash cans where the invisible kids sat, when Connor stepped into her path. "Congratulations," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. His smile was perfect, practiced. "That's really something. A national merit finalist who works at Subway. What an inspiration." Madison tried to step around him. She knew that tone, knew nothing good could come from this. But Connor moved with her, blocking her path. "You know what we should celebrate." He reached for the chocolate milk on his tray. "A toast to Madison Brooks, the scholarship queen." Have you ever had one of those moments where time slows down? Where you can see disaster coming, but can't stop it? That's what happened next. Connor's hand slipped. The chocolate milk arced through the air in slow motion, splashing across Madison's certificate, soaking through the paper, destroying the one thing she'd been proud of in months. "Oops," Connor said, his voice dripping with false concern. "How clumsy of me, but hey, you're used to cleaning up messes, right?" The cafeteria had gone quiet. 500 students watching, waiting. Madison bent down to pick up her ruined certificate. And that's when Connor made his big mistake. He put his foot on her sandwich, the turkey sub she'd made herself at work, her only meal until her shift ended that night. The bread crushed under his designer sneaker, mayonnaise oozing out the sides. He ground his foot down, making sure it was completely destroyed. "You know what?" Connor said, his voice carrying across the silent cafeteria. "I don't think you're getting the message. You don't belong here. Madison, you're a charity case playing dress-up in a world you'll never be part of. So let me make this real simple for you." He lifted his foot off the sandwich, leaving a dirty shoe print on what used to be her lunch. "Eat it." Someone gasped. A few people took out their phones. Most just stared. Madison looked up at him from where she knelt on the floor. "What? You heard me. Eat it. Show everyone where trash scholars belong. On the floor, picking up scraps." "Connor, man, that's enough." It was Jaden Cooper, Connor's friend since elementary school, the yearbook photographer who'd captured every one of Connor's achievements. Even he looked uncomfortable, but Connor was beyond listening. Something had snapped in him, some last restraint, because Madison Brooks, kneeling there on the cafeteria floor, still had more dignity than he'd ever have, and he couldn't stand it. "Eat it," he repeated, "or I'll make your life so miserable you'll beg to transfer. You think this is bad? You have no idea what I can do. My mother is on the school board. My father owns half this town. One word from me, and your scholarship chances disappear. One phone call, and Subway finds a reason to fire you. You want to play in my world, then learn your place. Eat the sandwich." Madison looked around the cafeteria. 500 faces stared back at her, some horrified, some amused. Most just grateful it wasn't them. She saw teachers at the edges, pretending not to notice. She saw Jaden with his camera hanging around his neck, his finger hovering over the button but not pressing it. And she saw Connor's eyes, behind the cruelty, behind the power play. She saw what this was really about. Fear. He was terrified of her, terrified of what she represented, terrified that everything he'd been told about deserving his position was a lie. Madison picked up the sandwich. Dirt, milk, and mayonnaise dripped from it. She could hear people recording, knew this moment would be preserved forever. She brought it to her mouth, and she took a bite. The cafeteria exploded. Some people cheered like they were at a gladiator match. Others turned away in disgust. Connor laughed, the sound sharp and victorious. Madison chewed slowly, swallowed, and stood up. She looked Connor dead in the eye, and when she spoke, her voice was steady as stone. "Are you satisfied?" Something in her tone made Connor step back, because Madison Brooks hadn't broken. She'd made a choice, and somehow that was more terrifying than any threat he could make. "This isn't over," Connor said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. Madison picked up her ruined certificate, her destroyed lunch, and walked to her table. She sat down, opened her textbook, and began to study, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just been humiliated in front of the entire school, as if she was exactly where she belonged. The cafeteria slowly returned to normal, conversations resuming, the spectacle over. But something had shifted. The invisible girl wasn't invisible anymore. And Connor Sheffield had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because that night, after her shift at Subway, after helping a drunk customer who'd cursed at her for putting too much lettuce on his sub, after counting down her register and mopping the floors, Madison Brooks went home and opened her laptop. She thought about the coding skills she'd learned the year before, when the Subway POS system had crashed during dinner rush. The night manager, Derek, was an IT dropout who'd taught her basic programming while they waited for corporate tech support. "Information is power," he'd told her, "and the internet, that's the great equalizer." Madison created a new blog, anonymous, untraceable. She called it "Merit Isn't Money." And she began to write. Not about her humiliation, not about the sandwich or the ruined certificate. She wrote about the system, the way rich kids bought their grades while poor kids worked themselves to death, the way teachers looked the other way when powerful parents complained, the way the entire educational system was rigged to keep people like her in their place. Her first post was titled "The Sandwich Principle." She wrote about how forcing someone to eat garbage wasn't about the food, it was about power, about making people internalize their supposed inferiority, about breaking spirits so thoroughly that they never tried to rise again. She wrote about the math teacher who gave Connor partial credit for wrong answers because his father had threatened to sue, about the guidance counselor who told her to be realistic about her college dreams while handing out Ivy League brochures to kids with half her GPA, about the principal who announced her national merit status but didn't mention she'd achieved it while working 20 hours a week. She wrote with the clarity of someone who'd seen the worst and survived it, with the precision of someone who'd learned to observe from the margins, with the fury of someone who'd been pushed too far. The post went live at 2 a.m. By morning, it had 50 views. By the end of the week, it had 500. Then something strange happened. Comments started pouring in, not from Riverside High students, but from kids all over the country. "This is my story, too. I thought I was the only one." Finally, someone said it. Madison kept writing, every night, after work. She documented the inequalities she saw. She analyzed the sociology behind them, the psychology that allowed them to continue. She named no names, but painted a picture so vivid that anyone from Riverside would recognize it. Connor, meanwhile, thought he'd won. Madison still came to school, still sat in her corner, still said nothing about what had happened. He'd broken her, he thought, put her in her place. His position was secure. He had no idea that Madison Brooks had learned something important that day in the cafeteria. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let your enemy think they've won. Let them get comfortable. Let them believe the war is over. Because Madison wasn't just writing a blog anymore. She was building a case, collecting evidence, preparing for something bigger than Connor Sheffield could imagine. The girl who'd eaten dirt in front of 500 people was about to show them all what she was really made of. And Connor's biggest mistake wasn't humiliating her, it was giving her a reason to fight back. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because what happened next? When Connor discovered the blog, when he realized the invisible girl had found her voice, well, that's when things got really interesting. Let me know if this reminds you of someone, maybe someone who underestimated the quiet kid, the poor kid, the one they thought would never fight back. Because Madison Brooks was about to teach Riverside High a lesson they'd never forget. The revolution always starts with the ones who have nothing left to lose. 3 weeks passed before Connor Sheffield discovered the blog. 3 weeks of Madison silently documenting every purchased grade, every ignored violation, every small corruption that kept the machine running. She'd gained 1,500 followers. Mostly students from schools just like Riverside places, where zip codes determined destinies and money could buy miracles. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Connor was in the library, supposedly studying for the AP Calculus exam, but really paying his tutor $200 an hour to do his practice problems. His phone buzzed. A text from his girlfriend, Sophia. "Have you seen this?" She'd sent a link. Connor clicked it, expecting another TikTok or Instagram post. Instead, he found himself staring at a blog post titled, "When Merit Meets Money, a Case Study in Academic Corruption." His blood went cold as he read. No names were mentioned, but the details were unmistakable. The student who'd received a 1490 SAT score after multiple attempts, whose father had donated exactly $50,000 to the school's computer lab. The same student who'd received partial credit in calculus for completely wrong answers, because his parents had threatened legal action. It was him. The blog was talking about him. Connor's hands shook as he scrolled through older posts. The sandwich principle. Why poverty is the only F that matters. The invisible students, a survivor's guide. Each post was meticulously researched, brilliantly written, and absolutely devastating to everything his world was built on. But it was the comments that really scared him. Hundreds of them, from students across the country sharing similar stories. The blog wasn't just popular, it was becoming a movement. Find out who's writing this. Connor texted his crew. Now. The hunting began immediately. Connor's friends, if you could call people bound by mutual benefit friends, spread through the school like antibodies attacking an infection. They monitored the computer lab, tracked IP addresses, pressured the quiet kids who might know something. Madison watched it all with grim satisfaction. She'd expected this, planned for it, even. Every post was uploaded from a different location, the public library, a coffee shop 2 towns over, even from her phone using McDonald's Wi-Fi during her break. She'd learned about VPNs and proxy servers from Derek, practiced until she could cover her digital tracks like a ghost. But Connor was getting desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. It started with the rumors, whispers that Madison Brooks was cheating, that there was no way someone working 20 hours a week could maintain perfect grades without help. Then came the anonymous tip to the administration that her latest English essay contained plagiarized passages. Madison was called into Principal Harrison's office on a Tuesday morning. She knew what was coming. She'd seen Connor talking to his mother in the parking lot, seen Mrs. Sheffield march into the building with the determined stride of a woman about to destroy a child's future. "Madison," Principal Harrison began, his voice carefully neutral, "we've received a concerning report about your recent essay on social inequality in education." Madison sat perfectly still. "What kind of report?" "There are allegations of plagiarism, specifically that several passages match content from an obscure sociology journal." He turned his computer screen toward her. "Can you explain these similarities?" Madison looked at the highlighted sections, her words next to paragraphs from a journal article published 3 years ago. The matching was almost perfect, too perfect. Because Madison recognized something the principal didn't. The journal article had been published 3 months after she'd submitted her essay. Someone had taken her work, backdated it, and created a fake academic publication to frame her. "When was this journal article published?" Madison asked quietly. "According to the date, 3 years ago." "Could you check the journal's actual website? Not just this PDF." Principal Harrison frowned but typed in the journal name. Error 404. The page didn't exist. The journal didn't exist. The whole thing was a fabrication. "I see," he said slowly. "Madison, do you know who might have done this?" She did. But she also knew that accusing Connor Sheffield without proof would only make things worse. "No, sir, but I have all my rough drafts, my research notes, everything time-stamped on my computer. I can prove I wrote every word." "That won't be necessary." Principal Harrison's face was tired. "I'll handle this. You can go back to class." As Madison left his office, she passed Mrs. Sheffield in the waiting area. The woman's designer heels clicked impatiently against the floor. Her face twisted with the particular kind of rage that comes from being denied what you've paid for. That night, Madison wrote her most powerful post yet. She called it The Plagiarism Playbook: How the Wealthy Weaponize Academic Integrity. She broke down, step by step, how someone with resources could destroy a poor student's future with fabricated evidence, how the accusation alone could derail college applications, how the investigation process favored those who could afford lawyers. But she ended with something unexpected: compassion. "The saddest part isn't the cruelty," she wrote. "It's the fear behind it. Imagine being so terrified of your own mediocrity that you have to destroy anyone who proves success can't be bought. Imagine knowing, deep down, that everything you've achieved is hollow. That must be a terrible way to live." The post went viral overnight, not just among students, but teachers started sharing it, then parents, then education reporters. The hashtag #MeritNotMoney began trending. Madison's follower count jumped to 10,000, then 20, then 50. Connor was losing his mind. His parents had hired a private investigator to find the blogger, but every lead went nowhere. His college counselor had started asking uncomfortable questions about his SAT scores. His friends were distancing themselves, afraid of being caught in the crossfire. And then, Jaden Cooper made a choice that changed everything. Jaden had been Connor's best friend since 3rd grade. He'd been there for every birthday party, every victory, every cruel joke at someone else's expense. But he'd also been there in the cafeteria, watching Madison eat that sandwich. He'd seen the look in her eyes, not defeat, but determination. And it had haunted him ever since. More than that, Jaden knew secrets. He'd been there the night Connor had called a special SAT tutor, the one who guaranteed scores above 1,400 for $20,000. He'd heard Connor bragging about how his parents had convinced teachers to change grades. He'd watched the systematic destruction of anyone who threatened Connor's supremacy on a Friday night. Jaden found himself at Connor's house for their usual gaming session. Connor was ranting about the blog, about Madison, about how he was going to destroy her once he found proof she was behind it. "I mean, who does she think she is?" Connor slammed his controller down. "Some Subway sandwich artist thinking she can compete with us. My dad owns half this town. My mom runs the school board. I've got Yale practically guaranteed. And this, nobody thinks she can take that from me." "Maybe she's just smarter than you," Jaden said quietly. Connor laughed. "Smarter dude. I paid good money to be smarter. You know how much those SAT answers cost, how much my parents spent on college consultants. That's what smart looks like in the real world. Money. So, you admit you cheated. It's not cheating when everyone does it. It's just how the game is played. Madison's too poor to understand that. That's why she'll always be serving sandwiches while I'm running companies." Jaden pulled out his phone, pretending to check Instagram, but he was recording. "What about the plagiarism thing? That seemed pretty harsh." Connor grinned. "Brilliant. Right. Took her essay. Had some tech guy backdate a fake journal. Would have worked too if Harrison wasn't such a bleeding heart. But whatever. I've got other plans. Did you know Subway does random drug tests? Be a real shame if someone reported seeing her smoking something in the parking lot. You're going to plant drugs on her. Not plant. Just heavily suggest. A few witnesses. Maybe some strategically placed evidence. She can't afford a lawyer. It'll be her word against mine. And we know how that goes." Jaden felt sick. He thought about Madison, working until 11 every night, studying until dawn, fighting for a future Connor was handed at birth. He thought about every cruel thing he'd watched Connor do, every person crushed under the Sheffield family machine. "I gotta go," Jaden said suddenly. "What we just started playing? Family thing. Sorry." Jaden drove home in silence, the recording burning in his phone like evidence of a crime. Because it was evidence of a crime. Multiple crimes. And he'd been complicit in all of them through his silence. That night, Jaden did something he'd never thought he'd have the courage to do. He created an anonymous email account and sent the recording to Merit Isn't Money. Madison was working the closing shift at Subway when she got the email. She listened to the recording 3 times, her hands shaking as she made someone's Italian BMT. Connor's voice, clear and damning, admitting to everything. The SAT cheating, the plagiarism frame-up, the plans to plant drugs. But it was what he said about money being intelligence that really struck her, because that was the whole system laid bare. The belief that wealth equals worth, that privilege equals potential, that the rest of them were just NPCs in rich kids' success stories. Madison knew she had to be careful. A recording alone could be dismissed, claimed to be edited or taken out of context. She needed corroboration, evidence, a way to make this undeniable. She started with the SAT tutor. A little digging revealed a pattern: dozens of wealthy students with suspicious score jumps, all using the same consultant. She found testimonials buried in prep school forums, coded language about guaranteed results, and investment in your future. Then she tackled the grade changes. Freedom of information. ACT requests revealed email chains between parents and administrators. Veiled threats about withdrawn donations. Sudden grade improvements after large contributions. She worked through the night, fueled by gas station coffee and righteous anger. By dawn, she had enough evidence to blow the whole system wide open, but she needed one more thing: a platform big enough to ensure this couldn't be buried. That's when fate intervened in the form of Rachel Chen. an education reporter for the Washington Post who'd been following the Merit Isn't Money blog. She'd sent Madison a message through the blog's contact form. "I think your story needs to be told on a larger scale. Can we talk?" Madison stared at the message for a long time. Going public meant giving up her anonymity, meant facing whatever retaliation the Sheffields could dish out. But she thought about every kid like her, grinding themselves to dust just to be told they didn't deserve success. She thought about Connor's voice saying, "Money is intelligence." She thought about that sandwich, and how many others had been forced to swallow their dignity. She typed back, "Yes." The story broke on a Wednesday morning. The privilege pipeline, how wealthy families are buying academic success, dominated the Post's education section. Madison's evidence was laid out in devastating detail: the SAT cheating ring, the grade manipulation, the systematic sabotage of promising low-income students. But it was Madison's personal story that captured the nation's attention. The article opened with the cafeteria scene. 500 students watching as she was forced to eat a dirty sandwich. It detailed her 4 a.m. study sessions, her 20-hour work weeks, her perfect grades despite everything. And then, the recording. Connor's voice, clear and unedited, bragging about buying his intelligence. The Post had verified its authenticity with audio experts. There was no denying it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Merit. Not Money exploded across social media. Other students came forward with similar stories. Parents demanded investigations. College admissions officers started scrutinizing applications from wealthy zip codes with new skepticism. At Riverside High, Connor Sheffield's world imploded in real time. He arrived at school to find news vans in the parking lot. Students filmed his every move. Teachers who'd once bent rules for him suddenly remembered their integrity. He was called to Principal Harrison's office before first period. This time, it wasn't just the principal waiting for him. 2 FBI agents sat at the conference table, badges visible, faces stern. "Connor Sheffield, we need to ask you some questions about academic fraud, conspiracy, and attempted extortion." Connor's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "I want my lawyer." "That's your right, but you should know that 3 of your tutors have already agreed to cooperate. The SAT scheme alone carries federal charges. And that's before we get to the attempted framing of Madison Brooks." By lunch, Connor was gone, escorted out by federal agents while the whole school watched. The boy who'd ruled through fear and money reduced to a perp walk in front of everyone he'd terrorized. But the story didn't end there. The investigation expanded, reaching into schools across the country. A network of privilege and corruption was exposed, inch by painful inch. Wealthy parents were arrested. Administrators were fired. The entire system of buying success was dragged into the light. And at the center of it all was Madison Brooks, no longer invisible, no longer silent. She testified before Congress about educational inequality. She spoke at conferences about economic justice in academics. Her blog became a book, then a foundation supporting low-income students. The reforms came slowly but steadily. Blind admissions processes, income-adjusted SAT scores, stricter oversight of grade changes. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Connor Sheffield was expelled. His Yale admission revoked. His family under federal investigation. The last anyone heard. He was working at his father's dealership. The empire built on corruption crumbling around them. But this story isn't really about Connor's fall. It's about Madison's rise, about how a girl who was forced to eat garbage refused to be garbage, about how she turned humiliation into fuel, silence into power, invisibility into influence. Madison graduated as valedictorian, her speech broadcast nationally. She spoke about the sandwich, about the blog, about the power of truth against money. But mostly, she spoke about the other invisible kids, the ones still fighting, still grinding, still refusing to accept that their worth was determined by their bank accounts. "They tried to make me swallow my dignity," she said, looking out at the crowd. "But dignity isn't something you can take from someone. It's something you carry inside. Stronger than any humiliation, more valuable than any inheritance. To every kid out there working the closing shift and opening their textbooks at midnight, you are not alone. Your merit matters. Your dreams matter. And no amount of money can change that truth." She got a full ride to Harvard. Not because of her story, but because of her grades, her scores, her essays about transforming pain into purpose. The girl who'd served sandwiches now studied alongside future Supreme Court justices and CEOs. But she never forgot where she came from. Every summer, she returned to that subway, not to work, but to mentor kids like her. She'd sit with them during their breaks, help with college essays, remind them that the world was bigger than the cruel hierarchies of high school. And Connor! Last I heard, he was still at that dealership, watching kids he'd looked down on drive off in cars he'd never be able to afford. There's a poetry in that, I think. The boy who thought money could buy intelligence. Learning that all it really bought him was a fall from grace. But the real legacy of Madison Brooks isn't about revenge or vindication. It's about the thousands of kids who read her story and realized they didn't have to accept the sandwich, who understood that the system could be challenged, that merit could triumph over money, that a voice raised in truth could echo louder than all the privilege in the world. Every year, the Merit Not Money Foundation gives out scholarships to kids like Madison, kids who work impossible hours and still ace their classes, kids who've been told they don't belong but refuse to believe it, kids who understand that excellence isn't inherited, it's earned. The foundation's motto, inscribed on every scholarship letter, comes from Madison's congressional testimony, "Excellence threatens privilege more than poverty ever could." And somewhere in America right now, a kid is getting off their shift at a fast food job, opening their textbooks, and refusing to give up. They're writing essays on borrowed laptops, solving calculus problems by streetlight, dreaming of futures that seem impossible. They are Madison's true legacy. The invisible ones who refuse to stay invisible. The silenced ones who found their voice. The ones who know that no matter how many sandwiches they're forced to eat, they'll never swallow the lie that they're worth less than anyone else. Because Madison Brooks taught us all something that day in the cafeteria. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is survive. Sometimes the greatest revenge is success. And sometimes, just sometimes, one person standing up can inspire millions to rise. They tried to bury her. They didn't know she was a seed. And from that seed grew a forest of change. Each tree, a student who refused to accept that their worth was measured in dollars instead of dreams. That's the thing about truth. You can try to silence it, buy it, bury it under privilege and power. But truth, like merit, has a way of rising to the surface. Madison Brooks forced us to see what we'd all been pretending wasn't there. The ugly machinery of inequality grinding beneath the American dream. She held up a mirror to a system that claimed to reward hard work while actively punishing those who worked hardest. And in the end, that's what scared people like Connor Sheffield the most. Not that they might lose their advantages, but that they might have to earn them. That they might be judged on merit alone and found wanting. The girl who ate the sandwich became the woman who changed the menu. And that, perhaps, is the most American story of all, the reminder that revolutions begin not with armies or money, but with someone saying enough and meaning it. Madison Brooks said enough, and her voice is still echoing in every classroom where a poor kid dares to raise their hand, in every admissions office forced to look beyond bank statements, in every young person who understands that their worth isn't negotiable. They thought they were teaching her a lesson about knowing her place. Instead, she taught the world a lesson about claiming it. Years later, Madison returned to Riverside for her 10-year reunion. She wasn't the scared girl eating sandwiches anymore. She was a civil rights attorney, fighting for educational equity across the nation. As she walked through the parking lot, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Connor Sheffield, older, humbled, working the night shift at his father's repo lot after the dealerships went bankrupt. Their eyes met across the asphalt, no hatred, no fear, just the weight of choices made and unmade. "Madison," he said quietly, I read your book." She stopped, waiting. "I have a daughter now. She's 7, smart like you were, and every day I terrify myself thinking someone like me might try to break her spirit because she threatens them." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry." Madison studied him for a long moment. "Tell your daughter she belongs anywhere her mind can take her. Tell her that every single day." As she walked away, Connor called out, "That recording, it was Jaden, wasn't it?" Madison paused. Jaden Cooper was now a documentary filmmaker, his latest work exposing corruption in elite universities. He'd found his conscience that night at Connor's house, and never lost it again. "Does it matter?" she asked. "Yeah," Connor said softly. "It means someone I trusted did the right thing. Maybe there's hope for me yet." Maybe there was. Because that's what real change looks like, not just systems reformed, but hearts transformed. Not just the mighty fallen, but the fallen redeemed. If this story reminded you of your own moment of standing up, of refusing to stay silent, share it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is let others know they're not alone in the fight. The sandwich is waiting. The question is, will you eat it? Or will you rise?